And so I love that in the classroom of being able to say what just pops into your head, because then you can discuss it. And that there is nothing better than that. I don't think there's any job out there that comes close to the feeling of every hour is a different hour. Even if it's a different group of kids, it still is a totally different experience. And nobody gets it in their job. And educators are so lucky. I feel like that we can be kinder to ourselves and allow ourselves to make mistakes and grow from them. I know that's probably a good place to start.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lost Art of Storytelling. My name is Nathan Salins, and today I'm interviewing Teri Handelman. Teri, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Nathan.
Oh, and quick intro, she helped found 2 schools in the Bay Area. So, Teri, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and about your childhood?
So I grew up in Redding, California, and it's a very beautiful area. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's gorgeous, but it's really small. And so there's not a lot of culture that goes on there, and not a lot of much other than like outdoor things. And my parents were both teachers. So I'm sorry, is Cole like?
No,
Is he allowed to be?
Yeah, he's fine. He's fine.
Okay, great.
He's starred in a few episodes.
He's so delicious. He's like a therapy dog. My parents were teachers, and so funny enough, when I went to college, I didn't think I would become a teacher. I went to Berkeley, and then and Berkeley was amazing because it was so extremely opposite from Reading, right? Like it's this bustling town, and there's all these things going on, and a lot of activism and politics, and it's super interesting. And I loved the dichotomy, and I loved being in Berkeley. And then, anyway, so Berkeley was just so different from my childhood home. And there was a lot more diversity coming to Berkeley too. So I love that part, getting to know so many different cultures and people. That Reading, by the way, is now much more diverse than what it was back then. There wasn't a whole lot back then. Yeah.
What was life like growing up in Reading?
Um, it was it was interesting because I don't know if you know much about Reading, but Reading is it's very far right conservative. So like when COVID happened, the majority of people in Reading didn't think it was a real thing. They thought it was made up by Democrats.
Oh.
And the world's largest Pentecostal church is in Reading. I don't know if you know Pentecostal church, but that's the church where they speak in tongues and they bring in snakes, like rattlesnakes during the... And so
Wow.
Reading has really transformed. It went from very small town, lots of people love their guns, and it's also a lot of people there are really big into Jefferson State. And that's probably something you're also not familiar with, but there's, in a lot of rural towns, there's a big push to, for small parts of California to break off. They want to become Jefferson State because they want to embrace guns and the Bible in schools. And so it was very interesting growing up in Reading to see kind of how it was evolving into this very religious political town, and which was, of course, very different from Berkeley.
And you went to college at Cal, right?
Yes.
What was your college experience like?
Loved it. I definitely partied way too much, Nathan, and that was not good. You should definitely focus a lot in college. I was a political science major, and I was in a sorority, and I think that's where the partying came in. And I did not know what to do. I think a lot of people don't know what they want to do in college, and that's okay. I think that's probably the majority of people. And then after Berkeley, during Berkeley, actually, I spent a summer in Hawaii. I went to summer school there, and I loved it. And so I thought, well, this would be a fun place to go to graduate school. And so right after college, I moved to Oahu, and I lived there for 5 years and went to grad school there.
Uh, Tell me about grad school. What'd you do?
I initially started out in grad school to become a therapist, and funny enough, one of my classes that I had to take was I was required to attend AA meetings every week the entire semester, and and I don't really drink, and so I would show up to these meetings, and I think by maybe the fourth or fifth meeting, they noticed I was constantly there, and they asked me if I wanted to come up and speak, and I was like, oh no, I'm actually here for grad school. And I think through that class, I realized um, this may not be the right fit for me, and so I pivoted into education, and I loved it. That program that I went to, they had it was Chaminade University on Oahu, because University of Hawaii, it was a 4-year program to get your master's and certification, and Chaminade was a 2 years, and I wanted a 2-year program. And there was a really big focus on Montessori teaching, and I loved the Montessori philosophy because it's very much student led. You as children, you discover what you're interested in, and then you do deep dives. And I really believe in the kind of the roots of Montessori. And so while in Hawaii, I also taught at Punahou, which is where Barack Obama went to school, and I taught at an all-girls school, but it was a religious all-girls school, and that was a horrible experience. And I don't think, there's nothing wrong with religious schools. There are wonderful schools out there, but for me, that was such a horrible experience that I vowed I would never do that again. The nuns were really, really mean. Not just to the students. Like they were.
Was it like a strict religious school or?
It was Sacred Heart, and so it was run by these nuns. And I don't know if you know this, but I think like in 18 states, schools are still allowed to hit students, public and private. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I know, right? It's always a surprise when people find that out. And so at the time, nuns were allowed to. So luckily, I went from Sacred Heart to Punahou, and I loved my experience at Punahou, and that totally drew me into education. I just loved it. Funny enough, after 5 years, I was ready to leave Hawaii. You're so remote, and it's a very deep culture into the Hawaiian culture, and then not a ton in everything else. And I'm not the person who wants to be surfing every day, so I realized it wasn't the perfect fit for me, and so I moved back home.
And how was education different in California than Hawaii?
Actually, it was very similar. Punahou at the time was this incredibly prestigious school. It was ranked like in the top 10 in the country, and they were graduating kids that were going to all these top schools. Funny enough, my brother went to Yale, and one of his roommates was from Punahou. And he would crank up the heat, and my brother would always come in like sweating, like, what are you doing? Because he wasn't used to Connecticut weather. But so I was impressed by the similarities with where I was at Punahou, not Sacred Heart, but where I was at Punahou, and what I found here in California too.
Sorry.
You got to ask what that was.
Yeah.
It's very progressive, and so I'm a huge fan, and this is kind of how I lead everything in what I teach. Is I think it's so important for kids to experience things, like when I was teaching math, I loved working with manipulative. So if you can work with, oh gosh, didn't I teach you hands-on algebra?
Yeah, in like 4th grade we were doing basic algebra.
Yeah, we were doing basic algebra. And do you remember how wonderful it was? It's a scale, and on the scale
there were little blocks, right?
Yes,
yeah.
We would have blocks, and we would have little, oh my gosh, those little chess pieces, and it would represent, so you learn how to balance your scale. And those are manipulative. So anytime you can work with your hands and experience what it means, I think it creates a much deeper learning experience. When you look at research around the world, TIMS is the big math research that they do. It's TIMMS, and they look at all the different countries and how they teach math, and they find like the strongest math programs tend to be like Korea and Japan. And interestingly enough, it's definitely not America, because in America we have so many families that are like, hurry, we try to force these concepts down your throat because we think if you learn more and more and more and quickly that it's better. If you're doing higher levels of math at a higher, like let's say you're in fourth grade and you're already in algebra, then that must be a good thing. And that's simply not true when you look at all the math research across the world. What they find, for example, like in Japan, they will literally spend an entire year doing an incredibly deep dive into one concept. And so the kids have a much deeper meaning for it. And they don't have to keep reviewing it over and over. In the United States, every year, when you start your school year, don't they do a lot of review?
Yeah.
Yes. And the reason why is because they spent such a short time going over each concept. So if we spent more time having these experiences and being able to work with your hands and being able to experience things by doing, then it's a richer experience for the kids. And so like I teach financial literacy, and I love it because we do a big focus on the stock market. And so every day when we come in, we talk about what's happening in the news and who are the direct companies that are going to be affected by this, but then also who are the other ones. It's kind of a domino effect. Who else might be affected? Would shipping supply be affected? Would trucking be affected? Because that's greatly affected when there are like tariffs and strikes and things like that. And so it's really important in order to have a deep understanding. Oh my gosh, I love Cole so much. In order to have a deep understanding, it's important to experience. That was a very long answer. Sorry, Nathan.
And how did the time in Hawaii shape you personally?
It actually made me more aware of struggles from other communities. Culturally, it made me become, even interestingly enough, more so than Berkeley. If you look at the history of Hawaii and you look at who they brought in to work the fields, it was, I think it was first the Japanese that they brought in. And so there's kind of this social hierarchy in Hawaii, and the Japanese are kind of at the top. And so the next group that comes in, next group, and next group, they've got this little hierarchy. And so I learned so much about the Hawaiians and their history and how we have screwed them and taking their land and all that, and what can we do to make amends. And so I that's what I appreciated about being in Hawaii, was having a much broader cultural awareness of so many island Pacific groups and Asian groups as well.
So you come back to California. What happens next?
So then I was living in the East Bay, and interestingly enough, Title IX had passed a little over 50 years ago. Are you familiar with Title IX?
I'm not.
So it's great. It's a wonderful law that was passed. And what Title IX said, so before Title IX, the majority of money at schools was given to boys' sports, boys kind of everything, and girls were not getting an equal share. And Title IX actually said a lot of things, but one of the things they said was we have to make sure that we're giving as much effort into women as we are into men. And so that's why you saw a lot of sports teams. So for example, if you have a 100-person football team and the roster, and you're spending X amount of dollars on your football team, you have to give that equal amount of money to women's teams. And so the beautiful thing about that was, then all of a sudden there was this push in helping women. And also interestingly, what came from that was there were a lot of studies done on girls and how they learn best. Here's what's fascinating. In the 50 years since Title IX passed, they haven't studied boys at all. To this day, they haven't studied how they learn best. And I'll get to that. I'll circle back to that in a minute. But there was a famous book called Reviving Ophelia, and there was a very large group of parents in the East Bay that were very concerned. They read Reviving Ophelia. They knew that girls were missing out on opportunities, and they got together. It was very grassroots. They got together and said, we need to start an all-girls school. And so they had hired a head of school, Ann Clark, and she had hired me. So I was one of the first 2 teachers at the school. And it was the most enriching experience I've ever had. Because we had to think of everything. We were literally creating the school, so we had to think and have these meaningful conversations about things like, do we do a dress code? Because there is a benefit to girls having a dress code. Then you don't have to worry about what you're wearing. And then, do we let them call us by our first names? Or do we go by a formal name because we want them to make sure that they show respect? Interestingly enough, we had Robin Lakoff, who's a very famous linguist at Berkeley. She may be retired now, but at the time she was super famous. And she came in and talked to us as we were having these conversations. And she was the one who said, when you take certain words away from students, then they want to use it more, right? So if you tell your kids you can't say the F word, they're really going to want to say the F word, right? So she was the one who said, I don't think it really matters. They can say Miss Handelman in a very disrespectful way, so it's not going to make that big of a difference if you go by first names or last names. But this is what I'm talking about. All of the decisions that we made were very thought through. And so, it was just this incredible time period. We got to create all the curriculum because we were not a public school. In public school, they're not allowed to finance single gender schools. So we had to be private, and we got to create everything from scratch, and it was the best. It was the best experience to be able to create everything and create curriculum and then pass it along. And I helped to create the financial literacy curriculum for all 3 years. And sadly, when I left the school, nobody wanted to take that on because I think they were very uncomfortable teaching about money. And so that program died, which is why when I started the boys' school, I wanted to make sure that they were learning about money and how to invest and how to balance their bank accounts and all that stuff.
And, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was just going to say, to circle back to so girls in education the past 50 years have really seen tremendous growth. And they still do really well. They find to this day, when girls are in single gender middle schools, their math and science scores go up. When they are in co-ed schools, they tend to either stay the same or go down. And it's interesting, right? Because when you think about it, when you're in class, because you go to a co-ed school, when you're in class and you know that there may be a girl that you like, or it doesn't matter, it just could be girls in class, you don't want to blurt something stupid out, right? So you're more aware of what you say. And I found when I've taught in all girls classes and all boys classrooms, there's a lot of blurting out. And sometimes they'll giggle because some kids will be like, oh, that was dumb. But then there's no judgment from it. Nobody feels shame, and they move on. And so I love that in the classroom, of being able to say what just pops into your head, because then you can discuss it. Let's discuss what just came out of your mouth and talk about it. And maybe you're right and maybe you're not, and let's challenge that. And not that people don't do that in co-ed. I'm sure you have a lot of people that shout out because I've taught in co-ed too. But I see that there's a benefit. So girls have really benefited ever since Title IX was passed. And interestingly enough, when you look at the number of boys who graduate high school, apply to college, graduate college, they are not doing as well as women. And that trend has been going on for like 30 years.
Wow.
And they're not performing at the same level as women. And so I think we owe it to our boys to also focus on them and figure out how can we lift everybody, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. And I'm a big believer in that philosophy. And let's see how we can help more men out so that they don't feel like they're being left behind.
And is that what motivated you to start Field Middle School?
Good question. No, I just had boys. I gave birth to 2 boys. So I was all in the girls' school, and then I gave birth to 2 boys, and I was like, oh, shoot. I didn't get a girl. But then Suzanne Gibbs, who's my co-founder of Field, she approached me and said, I want to start an all-boys school. I know you've done this before. Will you do it again? And I said, no way. It's so much work. I didn't want to do it again. And she didn't let up. She was incredibly persistent. And so we worked on it. Literally, that was, let's see, when Jack was in fifth grade, and now he's a freshman in college. So that's 8 years ago that we did it. And it took us 3 years to finally open our doors. But I'm so thrilled we did, because everything that I saw benefiting the all girls is exactly what I'm seeing that benefits the all boys. And they're so in touch with their feelings, and they can say things to each other, and there's a great sense of agency. And as you know, my second son went to school there, and he's best friends with these boys. He loved everybody in his grade, everybody in the school, and they call each other and tell each other they love each other. And it's this wonderful brotherhood that they have. And then they go off to high school and they get to, try out different experiences.
Mm. And what were some challenges of starting a school?
Oh my gosh, so many. It's so much more, it's going to sound awful, it's so much more rewarding to be the teacher than it is to have to worry about the money. So when you're on the board, you're you're worrying all the time, making sure we have money coming in. The biggest challenge for us when we started this school was finding a space, because as you know, it's so expensive living here, right? And so we were calling everything. We were calling churches, and then there were a few churches who had space. We got lucky because COVID hit, and there were churches that had space, but then we couldn't get the zoning, we couldn't get the permits, and it ended up being really, really challenging. That was our biggest challenge. And then funny enough, when I told you I was one of the first 2 teachers at Julia Morgan School for Girls, and 2 years in, we hired Jason Baton. And then after Jason was at the all-girls school for years, he broke off and he started East Bay School for Boys. And so I went to his school and I took a tour, and I remember crying at the end of the tour, because I thought, this is what I want for my children. I want my boys. I want them. The one thing that Jason said that really struck me was, he said, in order for your boys to be able to love and help anybody else, they first have to learn how to love themselves. And that really rang true for me, because so many people, especially young kids, there's so much that feels like out of their control, and they're being pushed and pulled, and they haven't found that love for themselves yet. And I thought that was so important. So when we decided to open up Field, I sent Jason an email with Suzanne's blessing, and I said, congratulations, Jason. You've just been offered the position as head of our school. And it was this really crazy move, because he wasn't looking, but he thought about it. He giggled when he first got the email, because he didn't know that this was going to be offered to him. And then he thought about it for a couple weeks, and he came back to us and he said, I'm in. And so at that point, he was helping us, while he was still at East Bay School for Boys, he was helping us with next steps and becoming an LLC and all these things that you have to think about when you're on a board.
And what does it take in order to turn an educational vision into like a fully functioning school?
Leadership. It takes incredible leadership. I think Suzanne and I got very lucky. We've gotten so many wonderful people on our board, and it's important for us that our board is not just current parents, because if you have a board with people and their main focus is, how is this going to help my child and directly impact my child, then that's the only lens that they see things through. And I think it's so important for board members to not have a dog in the fight, right? Like, just to think about, like, how is this going to help the full community? So creating a board that is effective, can work together, because I've heard of a lot of boards that don't. I think we've been very lucky we had a good board, but really hiring Jason as our leader, who has the vision, who is so compassionate with the kids and is so warm with them, I think that was key, because once you have that in place, then you can hire incredible teachers and you can set the culture of your school. And once you've set, and this is true of companies as well, once your culture has been set, it's really hard ship to turn around if it's going in a negative direction. It's really hard to turn around. So I think it's so important from the get-go that you enter everything with intentionality and compassion.
And were there moments where you doubted the process?
Hell yes, Nathan. when we weren't getting space, that's when I was like, oh good God, when are we gonna find a space? And then we found a space at Notre Dame University, but they had gone bankrupt, so we knew this was a very short-term space that we could be in, and it was pretty run down, but the grounds were incredible. Our kids had access to acres and acres of just free. It was like they were in the woods, which was incredible because it's the middle of Belmont on the most busy street in Belmont. So even though the building wasn't great, the outdoor environment was gorgeous. And then we had to find a new space. And so that is incredibly stressful for all the board members who've been on that committee. That's incredibly stressful. And I'm so grateful I have not been on that committee. And by the way, your mom we brought onto the board. And I knew she wasn't going to send any children to our school. But I'm circling back to how important it is to have non-parent board members on. Because your mother worked so hard for us. She was always present. She was always at the meetings. She was always thinking through the lens. She's a lawyer, so she was always thinking through the lens of legally what happened. How does this impact everything? And that's what you need. Is you need diversity of thought on your boards. You need all of that. And so all along the way we've had kind of little bumps, but the biggest bumps has always been space. And even like right now, we want to find our forever home. There is a space that we love, but we need like $1 million in order to do renovations that the city has declared we would have to do. And so here we are. We're just, we keep chugging along, hoping someday maybe somebody will donate that. We'll see.
What changes have you seen in education over the course of your career?
Oh my gosh, so much. I'm old, so when I started, there was no computer work, and so much of it was hands-on. If you were, in my opinion, a good teacher, there was a lot of hands-on stuff. And I was using, like the last time I had a full-time position, I was using an overhead projector, which makes me sound really old. So then when I came back to teaching, it like everything in technology changed the whole everything about your curriculum, everything you teach, how you teach it, how you engage with the kids, which is funny enough part of the reason why I haven't gone back to teaching math, because so much has changed in math. When I saw what Spencer was being taught, Field has this amazing math teacher, and it was very intentional that we chose a female math teacher in an all-boys school because we wanted them to see a role model of a woman who was really dominating in math. And we also had a male teacher teaching them SEL, social emotional learning, because we also wanted them to see a man who could be vulnerable and talk about his feelings. And that, by the way, is part of being a man, is being able to be in touch with that, of who you are. But there is so much has changed, and everything, it's all technology related. So I find every year when I go in to teach, I have to get refreshers on how to do things, and I'm bummed I didn't stay in education while my children were young, because I think if I'd had, the technology wouldn't be so challenging for me now if I'd stayed with it.
How do you measure success in yourself and in your students?
Oh my gosh, I'm so hard on myself. I never think I'm fully successful. Students, though, although I take that back, in a sense, there's nothing better than having an incredibly successful class that you've taught, where you're teaching them something new and they understand it. And you can tell when they do and they don't understand, because when they understand it, they're super engaged and they're asking all these questions, and everybody's in it. And there is nothing better than that. I don't think there's any job out there that comes close to the feeling of every hour is a different hour. Even if it's a different group of kids, it still is a totally different experience. And nobody gets it in their job. And educators are so lucky that we get that and that we get to experience the feedback and back and forth with these kids, and oh, I hadn't even thought of that question. Let's go down that road and let's talk about it. And that is incredible. And you can tell there have been some concepts. Like we were talking about buying on margin, because when I teach financial literacy, every kid gets a portfolio. They get $100,000 in their account, and they get to trade, and they learn how to short, and there's a lot of things. And teaching how to buy on margin, you could tell there were some kids that were like, what? And I was like, listen, this is not the most important thing for you to learn, and you probably shouldn't be buying on margin as adults if you're not in the industry. It's just good to kind of have an awareness that it exists, in my opinion. And that's, when you're teaching, you kind of get immediate feedback, because you can also tell the kids who are not getting it, because they drift, Nathan. They immediately will like, boop, and especially if they've got computers in front of them, bing, they open up a new window and they're onto something new. So you have to be constantly walking around and monitoring it, right? And like engaging with them and sitting down like, okay, I see that you've checked out, so let's get you back on track. Let me help you let's help find where you got stuck with that.
Mm. And was it challenging balancing family life while starting two schools, or?
So funny enough, the first school, my students they were girls, and they would always say to me, Terry, why don't you have children? And I would always say, you are my children. The idea of spending all day with these kids and giving them my all and then going home to children felt daunting to me, and it's exhausting to teach. And boy, field trips are really exhausting. So I couldn't imagine doing both. And so when I had my children, I stopped teaching. And I loved it but I also treated my children like students. Like every day from birth, I would sit down with them, and I would have like a little classroom with them, and we'd go to classes, like music together classes. We weren't doing like math, but as a math teacher, I'm a huge fan of math games, because I think you learn so much more when you're playing games, and then your kids don't realize that you're actually teaching them math. They think it's a fun thing as opposed to like drudgery, having to go to a class after school or whatever. And so I looked at my own children as students, and I was constantly trying to teach them things. And so it was nice when my kids were at an age where they could become a little bit more independent, but there were times starting the boys' school, there were times that it was really hard, because it was, for the first 2 years, I was board chair, and that was like a full-time position, and it was challenging to try to balance all of that. And by the way, I'm not getting paid for any of it, right? So there would be times my husband would be like, if you want to work full-time, you could get a job. But this is, I definitely wanted to start field for my boys, so that's why.
How do you hope your legacy in education will be remembered?
So I am still in touch with so many girls from the girls' school, mainly the girls in our first class, and I think it was because we had an incredible bond. And I'm amazed. Many of them have become MDs. Several have become PhDs. A few of them are on the board of the school. It makes me tear up when I see them on Instagram, and somebody who's getting married, or someone just graduated with a PhD, or someone finished their medical rotation and now they're getting a full-time job. I feel such joy when I get to see their accomplishments, and that I think is, and I even have field kids that will text me and say, hey, I checked my stock market portfolio this morning and this stock is up. The fact that they're still reaching out to me and talking about things that I taught them, I feel like that's my legacy. I hope this school continues on forever because I think it's an incredible environment. But I love the personal notes. I've kept all the notes along the way of all the kids who wrote me notes saying you changed my life. How many people hear that, right? Like your dad, does he, actually your dad gets that in his job. People come back because your dad gives free braces to people who are being bullied or whatever. And that's got to be such an incredible feeling when people come back and say, you changed my life, right? That's why you do it. Because you hope that you are changing people's lives and that you hope that you are making a difference. And it doesn't have to be for everybody, but for some, hopefully you are.
What are you most grateful for when you reflect on your story?
Oh, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful that my husband allowed me to do all of this because he certainly had to do a lot of heavy lifting while I was doing this. I'm grateful for all the people who also see the vision and were willing to jump in and help. We've got board members who will never have kids there and they jump in like your mom. I'm grateful for my friends, like your mom, who's a good friend, and the support that they give throughout the years. I'm grateful for all those people.
What advice do you have for the next generation?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, that's the one question I hadn't thought of. I mean, I think just, that's so tough. I think, if we can have kids not be so hard on themselves and cut themselves a break. I feel bad for your generation because in our generation, if we made mistakes or screwed up or anything, it wasn't documented. Nobody had a phone that they were recording it and then sent it out and millions of people could see your biggest mistake. We just made our mistakes and nobody knew. And how lucky were we? And so I feel like if we can be kinder to ourselves and allow ourselves to make mistakes and grow from them, I know that's probably a good place to start.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next segment of my podcast. I call it Nate's 8.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll ask you 8 rapid fire questions, and you need to answer them off the top of your head.
Oh boy, okay.
Okay. So if you could have dinner with anyone, past, present, or future, who would it be?
Oh, Barack Obama.
And why is that? Cole?
I
Cole!
Well, what good kisses you give. I think he's this incredible human being. I cried when he got into office. I cried when he got out of office. He's alive and he's seeing what's happening right now, and I'd love to just kind of pick his brain on finding hope, because that was his big thing that he campaigned on, was hope. And I'm not feeling that right now, and I want to feel that, so I think he could give it to me.
And what was the last book that you read?
Oh my goodness, The Lion Women of Tehran, and it is so ridiculously good. I loved it. It's all about these two best friends living in Iran during the coup, and so it's historical fiction. And one of them was very poor, so all the things that were happening were really directly affecting her, and one of them was very wealthy. And so all of the things that were happening with the upper class, it wasn't affecting her because it was only affecting the poor people, and they get to experience each other's lives throughout the book, and it's an incredible story.
What is your favorite song?
Song? Oh my gosh, probably Dream by the Cranberries, because my sister Lisa and I used to take a lot of road trips and we'd sing that obsessively, and she was horrible at harmonizing, but we would always try to do it, and I think I loved that.
What's your favorite sports team?
Oh, well, it's awful. I don't really love watching sports, but I love watching diving, because that's what my kids do. And so anytime I can watch diving on TV, like my favorite all-time Olympic sport has always been diving. So it's kind of cool that my kids are in diving, and hopefully, I have a funny feeling we're going to know several kids who are going to be at the next Olympics because they're friends with my kids.
What is your favorite food?
Oh my gosh, sushi, hands down.
Where's your favorite place in the world?
Oh, I mean, home, but my home with my husband and boys. But I mean, traveling, is that more it,
Well, yeah, home
or
could
is it just
be
kind of an open?
just anywhere,
All
yeah.
right, home. I'll say home.
If you could go back in time and say something to your younger self, what would you tell her?
Oh, ooh, what would I tell her? It's gonna be so bad. I would probably tell her love your body because it's gonna change throughout the years, and just appreciate it where it's at now, and that you're strong, and that's important.
And what would you do if you could be anything other than a teacher and a school founder?
Oh my goodness. There's so many interesting. Wouldn't it be so cool to be like a National Geographic camera person
That would
who
be
goes
cool.
out, right?
Yeah.
You go out in the wild and you. It also sounds like drudgery because you sometimes have to sit there for hours and hours. But that'd be so cool to be in the midst of all of these animals and get to experience places, and that'd be cool. I also, one of the places I'm dying to go to is, we took a couple of years ago, we went and did safari in Africa, and I'm dying to go to see the gorillas, and there's only one place in the world where you can see them. It's right at a corner where there's a couple countries, so it's like Uganda and Congo and Rwanda, and you can fly into those countries and then you trek up to see the gorillas. It'd be ridiculously cool to be a guide on one of those trips and to be able to see those gorillas every day. Or there's like another, come on up, honey. There's an elephant sanctuary in Kenya. It's called a sheldrick. Sheldrick. Oh, I forget the rest of it. Anyway, it's in Kenya, and they help just specifically elephants, but they also have a blind rhino there who will be a obviously permanent animal there because he can't ever live in the wild. And they
Cool.
post every day, and I've adopted a couple of the elephants because someday I'm dying to go visit.
Wow.
And I'd love to work there, but when I looked it up, I thought maybe I could
Cool.
like have a summer internship there. I know it's crazy sounding, but they said they don't take Americans because there's something about safety. Isn't that funny? And
That
I
is
was like,
funny, yeah.
Dang it! I want to work there. Yeah.
All right, that's a wrap. Mrs. Handelman, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Nathan. You were very good at these questions.
Thank you.